People have to sell technology, they have to support technology, whether it's cloud-based or whether it's data center technologies. There are so many different areas to focus on, and it continues to be a growth field. If you look at the statistics out there, I was recently at Rochester Institute of Technology, and I think one of the biggest challenges you're seeing is that everybody wants to get into security, right? Everybody wants to be a security expert, and the reality is that we still need data center experts, we still need storage people, we still need compute people, we still need all of these other fields.
But getting that data AI ready, because AI only is as good as the context it has. That's where I see majority of the investments going. The next phase of evolution is investing in context engineering and context orchestration. Once that happens, what happens is embedding AI into your processes becomes so much easier. Embedding AI into your workflows or reimagining the workflows to leverage AI becomes so much easier. The adoption will go through the roof. But right now, the enterprise context is a blocker.
Hi, I'm Jim Spignardo with ProArch, and you're watching the Data Center Go-to-Market podcast.
Hi, I'm Santosh Kaveti with ProArch. You're watching Data Center Go-to-Market podcast with Joshua.
Hi, it's Joshua Feinberg, host of the Data Center Go-to-Market podcast, and I'm thrilled to be welcoming today two very special guests. Joining me is Santosh Kaveti, who is CEO and founder of ProArch, as well as Jim Spignardo, who is the Director of Cloud and AI for ProArch. Santosh and Jim, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you. Nice to meet you, John.
Nice to meet you as well. So I'm super curious for each of you. I understand that you're heavily involved in the Microsoft channel partner ecosystem with all kinds of cloud and digital transformation projects. I'm curious how each of you ended up in this place in your career where you're in a leadership role in such an important part of what's happening with digital infrastructure. Why don't we start with you, Santosh?
All right. Okay. So my journey started with modernizing applications, ERP systems. So I've been through several cycles of ERP modernization. And of course, my core focus and forte has always been Microsoft technologies since inception. So that's how I got into Microsoft ecosystem. And when I founded ProArch, it was natural for me to pick Microsoft as a partner. And I'm glad we did. The journey has been fantastic so far. We've gone through lots of evolutions, revolutions, and now a huge paradigm shift, of course, with AI. But that's been it's been a fantastic journey for me so far.
I always find that super interesting. My first job in college was working for IBM, evangelizing early generation PCs and working very closely with Microsoft. And as a result of that, I spent the first 10 years of my career in the ecosystem. And at the time, everyone always said nobody ever got fired for buying IBM. But the reality is there's been a don't bet against Microsoft going for the better part of a generation now. And I think their channel partner ecosystem, that moat with tens of thousands, at one point hundreds of thousands of solution partners, has been a huge part of what's allowed them to take risks and most of the time get it right. But even when they haven't gotten it right, it's provided them with a really protective way of bouncing back.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Jim, how did you end up in your place where you're in such a Microsoft cloud-centric, AI-centric role now?
Yeah, so my journey really began, I was an educator by trade early on and got hired with a small company out of Long Island that needed someone to train technology instructors and kind of learn the ropes of IT very quickly. And then a few years later, I became a Microsoft certified trainer, also for a Microsoft partner. That really allowed me to just incredibly expand my knowledge set on all types of technology as it relates to Microsoft. Did that for about 9 years, went into the healthcare space for about a 6-year stint where I was the lead Microsoft engineer for a hospital system. Learned a lot about day-to-day operations of a very large environment, 4,000 employees, 2 data centers. When I left there, I came to work for ProArch and took a consulting position. And I've worked with our customers for about 9 years now. But most recently, thanks to Santosh, I kind of took on this role of AI enablement for ProArch internally, both internally, but also for our customers. If you think about it, it's a position that really didn't even exist, 3-4 years ago, and it's been an absolutely wonderful journey.
Yeah, it's so strange that in a period of like 7 or 8 years, people went from thinking of AI as almost science fiction. And I was doing some work as a fractional CMO for a couple of years for an AI SaaS company in the late 2010s. And people were really afraid. And it went because of Sam Altman and OpenAI within a period of like 5 years, it went to the point of mainstream tipping point. I mean, the crazy adoption curves on that compared to pretty much any other modern consumer facing technology.
Without a doubt.
Absolutely.
And those investments that Microsoft made in training you and training the trainer, I saw firsthand as well. I was an early MCSE in the late 1990s, and I've stayed pretty much 1 degree, 2 degree of separation in that ecosystem for most of the better part of the next 15, 20, 25 years. So they really, what's interesting too, is I don't think they realized how right they were at the time. I was watching a podcast interview with Steve Ballmer a couple months ago on the Acquired podcast, and he was talking about how they had these deep insecurities in the late 90s and early 2000s that they were really good at B2C, but they really didn't have street cred in B2B. And I guess at the time they were probably comparing themselves to like maybe Oracle or Sybase or something like that. But wow, what a difference it's made in a generation.
Sure. Yeah. It's almost flipped on its head completely. I think there's a lot of people that don't really think about Microsoft too much in the consumer space anymore, despite the fact that they own quite a few properties in that area.
They definitely flipped the script there.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So especially, Jim, with you in the place where you were involved in a trainer role for so many years and worked in an enterprise environment, I'm sure it comes up with both of you from time to time. When you come across teenagers, when you come across kids and they're curious about what careers look like in this kind of ecosystem, at this stage of the game, it wasn't so much the case that they would have heard of data centers 10 years ago, but because of OpenAI and NVIDIA and the immersive growth of capital is going in this space, what would you talk about with a son, daughter, niece, nephew, teenage son or daughter of a neighbor or coworker that's curious about picking your brains over breakfast or hopefully not too much coffee at that age, but they're really curious about your mentor advice. What would you be talking to them about, especially if you sense that they may not being interested in a software developer role or engineering kind of role, but they're more curious about what some of these client-facing, more soft skills based opportunities might look like? Santosh, let's start with you.
Yeah, well, I have 2 kids, so I go through this almost every day with them. But I think what I'm realizing is that they're actually probably more aware of these tools and their capabilities than I thought they were. So they absorb very fast. They're like digital natives for the most part. But I think what was important to teach them, at least this is what I try to tell them, is look, don't try to use AI to solve your problems, as opposed to use AI as a creative thinker that will help you understand concepts that you're struggling with and help you really uncover and unpack so that you yourself can build that thinking. That was one thing that I always push them is use AI to really enhance and amplify your creative thinking. Otherwise, what happens is that becomes your default first go-to choice to solve a problem and move on. The second thing I tell them is don't use AI or any technology. Don't go to that as your default choice. Okay, you have to struggle a little. You have to understand a little. The brain rot, potential brain rot, is real, and also the vanilla effect of everybody's work being the same is also real. So what I tell them is really, how do you leverage these tools, which are very powerful? They have vast amounts of knowledge that they've amassed and learning that they've amassed, is to really amplify your own creative thinking process, problem solving process, and concept understanding process, because they are taught a concept certain way, but when they turn to AI, and then we've gone through this in several cycles with my own kids and saying, hey, let's ask AI about solving this problem or understanding this concept in a different way, whether it's calculus, whether it's algebra, whether they're trying to solve a differential calculus problem. How about we think about this different way and see what you understand? It's amazing how much they can get out of that, and also how easy it is to use these tools to simplify, break down the concepts, and really understand them. I think it'll revolutionize the way the kids will be taught in the future. But it gives them a great tool to actually empower them with much more information thinking than otherwise. So don't go to digital AIs as a default choice. Don't try to make it solve your problems. You have to solve your problems. You have to think. You have to ruminate. You have to dream. You have to do all the work, but use it to expand your creative thinking. That's the bottom line of what I teach everybody. And it works if they get it right.
Yeah, it's such a big challenge at this point. My kids are around the same age, one in high school and one in college. And on the one hand, you have the teachers who are basically vilifying, calling AI cheating, so much to the point, like you go to back to school night and they're encouraging kids, despite the fact that Google Classroom has been very well adopted for the last 10 years, to start going back to doing a lot more assignments on paper, which I guess isn't a bad thing. It's good that they know how to do handwriting. But yeah, at the same time, we're talking about like their entire career future is going to be dramatically impacted by this technology, but it's evil to use it to help you with anything school related. So yeah, there's a lot of figuring out like what the right messaging is for kids and how to reinvent formal education around this.
The one thing I'll say, that the shadow AI, which we struggle in the corporate world, oh, believe me, kids use it. Whether I think it's better to embrace it than to fight it and portray it as something evil. I just want to point that out. Over to you, Jim.
I was going to say, from the perspective, and I have 3 kids of my own. They're all in that kind of exploring where they want to be. My last one is almost 20 years old. Really, what I would say is, IT is a vast field, right? There's lots of different technologies or different things you can get into beyond just software development. And so, keep an open mind. People have to sell technology. They have to support technology, whether it's cloud-based or whether it's data center technologies. There are so many different areas to focus on. And it continues to be a growth field. If you look at the statistics out there, I was recently at Rochester Institute of Technology, and I think one of the biggest challenges you're seeing is that everybody wants to get into security, right? Everybody wants to be a security expert, and the reality is we still need data center experts. We still need storage people. We still need compute people. We still need all of these other fields, and if you're finding yourself in an area where either A, you just don't enjoy that, or the market is tightening, there's plenty of other things to do. First find something that you're interested in, and then link it back to technology. But at the same time, keep an open mind, because it'll change. It will absolutely change as well.
Have you seen anything change in recent years with college being a requirement for entry-level jobs at ProArch? I mean, historically, 10 or 20 years ago, for nearly all of these jobs, having a bachelor's degree or at least an associate's degree would have been the entree point for any part of the Microsoft partner ecosystem. But are you seeing any changes already with the kind of candidates you're talking to?
I think IT has always been a little bit more understanding that people can come to this industry from a lot of different places. I mentioned early on, my background was in social studies education. I didn't have a degree. Keep in mind, I did have a degree. But when we look at candidates that we're trying to hire, it's more about experience and results than it is necessarily the degree you have. When I worked at that hospital system, the absolute best network engineer that we had was a gentleman who never went to college. He went straight from high school. He had taken some technology courses in high school. I think back then it was the Cisco Academy. And he took a personal passion and invested in himself and spent plenty of his own time learning this stuff. And he was absolutely hands down the best network engineer we had. And so as it relates to upper level types of positions, yeah, there's still that kind of expectation. You have some background in post secondary education, but again, it's not really about the degree. It's about what you've done and how do you improve those results, in my opinion, anyways.
Yeah, it's interesting too, is there's, at least in big markets in the US, there's plenty of high schools now and school districts that have adopted like CompTIA and Adobe and teaching Salesforce and Quick. They're definitely getting closer to things that are a little more hands-on. The challenge is there doesn't seem to be the same kind of internship type of discipline around getting kids in those programs to get a couple of years of part-time resume experience or summer job kind of experience, so that they're super appealing at 18, as opposed to needing to kind of get that practical experience to impress upon an employer.
Sure. Yeah. Understood.
So that's a fantastic conversation for someone that's super early on in their career. What about someone that you may have worked with 10, 15 years ago, earlier on in your career? You haven't seen them in a while. You used to be really close with them. You maybe bump into them at a conference or in the airport, and you sense that they're a little bit burned out. When you knew them, maybe they were like a project manager or customer success or something that's a little more client facing, and it seems like they're just spinning their wheels now and trying to figure out what their next move would be. What would you talk about with that gentleman or lady over lunch?
Oh, we run into, at least I run into those situations, quite frequently. Well, I think what happens to most, we're all human. We kind of box ourselves. Somewhere we stop learning and expanding, and somewhere we also stop unlearning, so that we can expand and we can learn new things. And I've seen that happen to many time and again. Well, there was also a time where you could be good at one particular technology subset and you can make an entire career out of it. But I don't think that the future is going to be that. I don't think the future is going to be your particular skill set. I think it'll be holistically the capability and the mindset and that you bring to the table, the value that you bring to the table, and as Jim said, results that you're willing to create. I think that's what happens to most of the seasoned experiences. They have the wisdom and they have the experience, but I've seen them kind of box themselves in to one particular way of doing it. Now, because they've experienced a lot and they said, okay, this is what works and I'm going to do this, and I know everything else, I don't want to kind of deal with that. But the technology, the situation, the culture, the entire spectrum is changing so fast that I think there's a need for them to unlearn a little bit and then say, okay, how can I now fit into this new ways of doing? And what I've seen with folks who've done that successfully, they actually thrive. But more importantly, they have such a great wisdom that they carry with them. And when they put themselves in a situation to train others, especially the ones who the new graduates, they do a great job, phenomenal job. Once they put themselves in that situation, say, look, you know what? I'm not only going to change and adapt, but I will share my wisdom with others and let them level up faster. I've seen tremendous results there in many, many cases.
Jim, what have you seen work especially well for people that are more mid-career, that are way too early to retire, but they're trying to figure out what the second half of their career might be looking like?
I would say be willing to adapt. This is an industry that doesn't favor folks who are interested in comfort, right? That seek stability. And I have a lot of relatives who are in government and in public service, and they do great work, and it's an honorable field to be in. But if you're in IT, you have to embrace the fact that at some point what you're doing may become irrelevant. And a good example, again, I go back to the healthcare industry. We were a regional hospital healthcare system with 4 different locations, and we were purchased by a very large hospital network of 87 different hospitals. At the time, I said before, I was the lead Microsoft engineer, but I quickly realized, you know what? A lot of the responsibilities I have are probably going to go to central IT. And so it's time for me to pick up, move on, and find a new path. I had also pretty much, I love being in an enterprise organization, but there's a lot of siloing that goes on. And having been in an education field where I was learning constantly, I knew it was time for me to get back on the learning track and expanding my career and reaching, for new things. And the other thing too was, there was little of any cloud adoption going on, and I knew that was going to be a pretty big and a very important piece of this industry. And that's kind of why I transitioned and pivoted over to ProArch. So for the folks that are out there, yes, you got your 9 to 5, your 8 to 5, whatever it is. But don't be afraid to pick up a book on a new technology and read a couple chapters every night, or join a user group on a technology that you're not familiar with. Or to Santosh's point, reach out to someone within the organization that has a different skill set and ask them to mentor you, so that you can keep your skill set varied and up to date.
Yeah, those are all fantastic suggestions. And there really is no longer a barrier of needing your employer to even cast aside budget. What we're literally doing now, if someone made a good playlist and they were taking the 2 hours a day that they were commuting, or the hour a day that they were at the gym, or the 100 hours a year that they're sitting in airports doing business travel, wow, could they get through a lot of podcasts and YouTube videos that would help their career?
Absolutely. Yeah, without a doubt.
I do think we at least I try to do this at ProArch intentionally, is to change roles, put people in different situations to be able to, sometimes we're forcing the change. That's what we're trying to do, so that they're not in one role doing one thing for a prolonged period of time. So we're forcing the change, and seeing how that works out for them. And in most cases, it actually works out great. Sometimes employers can also do more to force that change, give them the space and time, of course, to learn, but be that catalyst to allow people to change and adapt and be nimble and everything that Jim was talking about.
The Data Center Go-to-Market podcast is sponsored by DCSMI, elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market GTM professionals in the growth of the data center industry. To stay informed about upcoming episodes, make sure that you subscribe to the Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter on the DCSMI website that can be found at www.dcsmi.com. Again, that URL is www.dcsmi.com.
An interesting byproduct with this as well is I speak primarily to people in sales and marketing and go-to-market leadership roles. And as the self journey becomes a bigger part of how IT buyers buy, there's less of a need for human salespeople to be involved in, especially in commoditized, well-established categories. And what I've seen, at least with sales talent on the data center operator side, is they're getting a lot more technical. Like they'll have home computer labs, they're getting entry-level training and certification credentials that put them more as like a peer of the prospects and clients they're selling with. I also see among the infrastructure companies, they're hiring a lot more engineers into business development roles, where they're kind of forcing this whole idea that the traditional account executive, sales development rep, business developer is more of a teacher, consultant, expert than they would have had to be 5 or 10 years ago to stay relevant. Are you seeing any trends like that among your own client-facing team members at ProArch?
Yes, we are. I actually believe that. I think what we're seeing is the behavioral change in how customers are making decisions. When we work with our customers to figure out where we can add value, and also new prospects, as our teams bring in new prospects into conversations, what we're realizing is very quickly they want to talk to someone who can understand their needs and quickly is able to say, you know what, I got you. I know exactly what you're going through. I think we can solve you and we can help you. The minute you get into conversation, hey, I'm the salesperson or an account executive or a relationship guy, you know what, I'm going to bring in my technical person to the table. Let's have a conversation. That just, I think over a period of time, I'm sorry to say this, but that will become obsolete. I think the customers will consume as as companies become more and more AI native. In fact, the bridge is gonna, close much, much faster, where people want to talk to someone who's done this, who understand, who get them, and then say, okay, I can really help you. And we attempt to do that as much as we can, is get on the first call and say, you know what, can we solve your problem or no? And let's get to the next stage very quickly if we can. If not, just simply say, no, this is not our forte. Someone else can help you, and we'll bring you a partner or somebody else who can help you. So I'm seeing that shift and a change, and we're going through that actually. And Microsoft themselves, I've seen them change their designations and titles to move towards the model that you're describing. They've completely re-architected their own sales engine and the customer service engine to be able to more focused on, hey, how can we quickly understand and solve their problems, as opposed to try to build relationships and let it be relationship driven.
The irony too with a lot of this, and Jim coming from the perspective of being a Microsoft certified trainer, like everyone 25 years ago knew how valuable it was to have like breakfast seminars and lunch and learns as a sample of like getting into a 5-day program. That's probably a big part of how I ended up going through a lot of those programs. And all of a sudden people have forgot those lessons that they learned about the value of webinars and teaching and being seen more like a trusted advisor. And they kind of have to relearn a lot of this to continue to stay relevant or earn their way back in. So it's a lot of cultural challenges and where the priorities and the revenue is going on go-to-market teams.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you hit it right on the head, right? Trusted advisor. Customers and clients want to know you're there for the long term. That we've had customers say this to us. We think of you as an extension of our team, and waiting in the wings when there's an issue or something that we can't figure out or is beyond our means or skill set, we know who we're going to reach for. And instead of that situation where we're selling things, right? We're really kind of just saying, we're here, we have the expertise. We're willing to share some of that sometimes through the ways that we communicate through our social media channels or through webinars or what have you. But ultimately, our best recurring revenue comes from those customers that we have spent the time learning about their environments, learning their challenges, and solving for their issues. And sometimes that's preemptively solving for them because they don't necessarily have the knowledge to know what they need just yet. And so we're there to kind of do some education about, hey, there's going to be a shift in your industry. These are the things you need to be aware of. And where does this fit on your roadmap? How are you going to pivot to make sure that you're still going to remain competitive in whatever industry you're in?
That's another unmistakable trend that we see going on. Is it used to be that teams would just specialize by geography. They would specialize by company size. We're seeing a lot more specialization by vertical. Like I imagine when you have a conversation with someone that works in a hospital, you have like instant street cred, having
right.
led IT in a big enterprise hospital environment for years.
Sure, yeah, it definitely helps. And we can't be everything to everyone, like Santosh said, but we do have a pretty deep network of individuals. We have people that have worked in a lot of different industries. We have folks we can call on to bring in to kind of assist us when maybe the conversation is a little less familiar to us, so to speak. But we also spend a lot of time as an organization just researching our industries that we serve and making sure that we have a good foundational understanding of what goes on in those industries, even if we haven't necessarily been directly we haven't worked directly within those verticals. So
when you think about what's going on in the data center, critical facilities, digital infrastructure at a macro level, we segment up the industry into data center operators, data center technology companies, data center facilities related companies, kind of put construction, real estate, and investors all together, and then outsource to sales and marketing. For ProArch's business model, I'd consider like as a service provider, a trusted advisor working within the technologies space. When you look at the kinds of companies that you work with, whether they're data center operators, whether they're end users that are exiting out of data center traditional colo environments and moving into cloud, what do you think is the biggest problem or challenge they're facing that if you could get to them 6 months or a year before they ran into this, you would have some proactive advice to steer away from that and come up with a much better outcome? Jim, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, I think it's very important to understand, where the technology trends are going. A lot of cases we see organizations that, whether they're traditional on-prem or hybrid or cloud, they don't necessarily know why they need to be in one of those buckets or not. And to understand, what are some of the advantages to starting to implement cloud services to your practice. And sometimes it's daunting for those organizations from a standpoint of, well, we don't really have the talent or skills within our organization to kind of approach this. And, we're not sure what the value this is going to bring to the organization. So we're going to stay the course, right? And you find that puts them in a position where at some point they have to make that decision about, are we going to start making a transition to cloud, and how does that look, right? So we spend a lot of time, I go back to this again, we spend a lot of time educating our clients on the benefits of certain options. And we like to see it as options, right? There's no, hey, you have to do this, right? You're going to fail if you don't absolutely do this. There are, without a doubt, justifications for why specific industries, workloads have to remain on-prem, whether it's latency or compliance or security, whatever. But then again, there are certain things where when you have those opportunities and those decision points come up, I'll give you an example here. The Broadcom acquisition of VMware and all of the fallout that brought upon the industry. A lot of organizations spend a lot of time spinning the wheels until they got to that point where that renewal came up, and the answer was, well, it's going to go up and we're not going to get a lot more choice. We have no idea what it's going to look like the next time we renew, but what else are we going to do? We'll just renew, right? And they should have spent some time looking at the options that were available to them to best put them in the position to secure their business and make sure that it's on solid footing.
Do you find that because of issues like both VMware and repatriation and similar kinds of issues, do you find increasingly that you're having a lot more conversations with CFOs, or in some cases these financial issues being so large that they're going all the way to the board?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. There's plenty of times we'll do a cloud assessment or cloud feasibility assessment, and it's a big number. No, let's not kid ourselves. It's something that will eventually have to be approved by the board. And but the most of the times we make the case and we state the where the benefits are, we demonstrate the total cost of ownership of what's going to take to make those changes, and when they can expect to kind of see some return on investment and start to see some value coming back. We present all that out there very clearly, and that's kind of what we're really good at. Which, unfortunately, a lot of people in IT positions who are came up from a technical perspective, they're not great at those things. They're not great at explaining these things and talking to the board and making and justifying the case. And so that's where they kind of lean on us to do that for them.
I get asked a lot of times, who do I think their decision maker is going to be? I'm like, I don't think it's a single person as a decision maker anymore. It's it's always a committee. It's just a matter of how transparent they're going to be with you about who's actually on that committee, or whether you're going to have to infer a lot if you don't have a good trusted relationship with that client.
Yep, very much so.
Santosh, how do you feel about what do you think is the big challenge or the big problem that is pretty universal across enterprises with their own data centers and data center operators?
The way we describe ourselves, right? For us, we bring the infrastructure, data, AI, and security together. That's what we do really well. But the customer, right? They're trying to achieve an outcome. They're trying to accomplish a business objective. Okay. So a lot of times, many of our enterprise customers, they have their own data centers. The discussions a lot of times maybe start with, "Hey, I want to move this data center to cloud," or "No, I don't want to. We don't want to maintain this. We're just going to go to colo." But what we try to do a lot of times is go back up and say, "Okay, why?" And what value does really add to what is a business objective, and what's the outcome that you're looking for? What's the end result here? And go through from there. And what we do, and we're lucky to have this depth and breadth of expertise to be able to bring the data conversation, the infrastructure conversation, and AI adoption conversation with the security as a foundation together and say, this is the best practice. What we see a lot of times is enterprises making very siloed decisions without looking at that big picture. And a lot of times we're brought in when a decision is made, and then we're asked to kind of rip it apart and put it back together. We see that quite often. And the challenge, especially now in the AI adoption era, is there's any decision right now has a huge impact downstream. And most of the decisions right now are being taken to facilitate AI adoption. And they're not thinking through, well, what exactly do they really want to accomplish? And one example, they chose a data center in the wrong zone, ended up costing them a lot more than they should have. They didn't think it through on exactly where their AI workloads are going to be, where the consumption is going to be, to design it the way they're supposed to, and how their BCP and disaster recovery and security all tie in. So the biggest, I would say, the wrong trend is still continuing to make siloed decisions, and then the downstream effects are huge. Especially in the AI world, it just amplifies everything. So the downstream amplification is worse than before. That's what we're seeing quite a bit in our experience. Then, would you agree?
Yeah, and so it sounds like there's a lot of cultural issues and alignment issues internally, and perhaps even internal politics that prevent the silos from coming down and working together and getting the true multidisciplinary collaboration to find the right answer.
That is still a big challenge. And in AI journey, that actually has gotten worse. In fact, we actually appreciate some of this, because for the first time, the data journey or data decisions were siloed, restricted to certain departments. But businesses are now figuring out that, hey, I can use AI, but to use AI, I need to get my data right. So businesses are pushing for these conversations. They're still siloed, but at least there is increased awareness of data readiness, data security across the businesses, thanks to AI. But yeah, in AI, the collaboration across, making decisions across AI, it's still not anywhere close to where it needs to be in terms of the maturity. And we have excellent frameworks to help companies, and we do that very well. Is to really how do you go about making those decisions? What kind of governance do you actually have in place? Governance is not a bottleneck. Governance should be enabler. That's what we firmly believe. And I know Jim, works in a lot in that area. But again, with the right governance, you can make decisions faster and scale faster. But many companies don't start there. And it's good to let everyone experiment, but then once it explodes, it's gonna be very bad.
Either of you have any favorite tools that you use, either personally or your direct reports use, that are indispensable to what you need to do with clients?
Well, I mean, I could find it very hard to live without AI these days. I think that's the obvious one. Being a Microsoft shop, we're a huge consumer of M365 Copilot, and we've developed a number of agents to really help us with various workflows. Outside of that, from the cloud side and the workload management stuff, we use Azure Migrate pretty extensively to analyze our customers' environments, whether they're in another cloud, whether they're on-prem, VMware, Hyper-V, it really doesn't matter. And that just gives us some incredible insights into how those systems are being used, the dependencies that exist between them, and giving us an idea of how feasible is it to move XYZ workload. Similar product that Landsweeper purchased a number of years ago is called Cloudockit, all one word, and we use that extensively as well from the standpoint of for discovery, for looking at our customers' environments. Once again, it can look at their cloud services, M365. It can look at Hyper-V. It could look at Azure. It can look at VMware, GCP, AWS, and give us a very broad picture of everything that they have out there, to not only for documentation purposes, but also to understand when we assess them to move them forward. On a personal level, I love home automation. I think I have 95 smart devices on my network, which is hard to believe. And I've recently started tinkering with Home Assistant. So I have that loaded on a little Raspberry Pi, and I've created multiple automations, which fills up all my other free time.
When you left there, my day starts with I'm going to limit to what I do with AI and how I use it. Copilot and agents that we've created through Copilot. My day actually starts with that. I can't imagine now what my day would look like without Copilot. I use it to help prepare for the day, prioritize, talking points, what's important, what's happening, what do I need to. My agent's already doing the research for me to gather information that I need to be productive in terms of how I make my day. So AI really reshaped my workflow, my entire day. So at work, Microsoft ecosystem, Copilot, we use it extensively, all the way to creating some customized LLMs. Personally, I experiment a lot. I probably use this just about any AI tool that's out there. I'm on the leaderboard constantly looking to see, what's good at what and experimenting with it. We played with, of course, ChatGPT. Definitely playing a lot now with Anthropic, Claude's. The verticalization is what I find it very fascinating now that these companies are beginning to release verticalized solutions, legal, coding, and so on and on. So we're experimenting with that to see, okay, how far can we stretch the limits here? But personally, that's what I spend a good bit of time just keeping up with how fast-paced the releases are, and just experimenting to see how far we can push the limits.
Cool. That's a really interesting window into what's driving your daily, weekly, monthly routines and your productivity and how much it's changed in recent years. The final area I want to each ask about is when you look into your crystal ball and you think 2, 3, 4 years out from now, how do you think what you spend your time on may change, and what do you think will be staying the same?
So, it's hard to predict. It honestly is. And I think we have to be cautious about making too bold of predictions, given the fact that we probably couldn't have predicted that we would be where we are if you asked 2 years ago. But, if you look at where things are headed, it's really about trying to take the processes within organizations that are really of an administrative nature, that are low skill, that really are routine, that don't really require a lot of analytical thinking or nuance, and automating those and kind of putting those into workflows, agentic workflows that can really streamline the business pretty easily. So that kind of leaves the rest for the rest of us, right? It's still about meeting and communicating and relating to each other on a human level. It requires us to think about the higher order thinking types of tasks, consulting, solutioning, and spending more time on creative things that hopefully can, continue to allow us to develop even more incredible tech that hasn't yet been thought of, and free us up from, I call them like the 3Ds: the dull, the draining, and the distracting. The things that we all have to do because it's part of our job. But ultimately, if we could hire an assistant, ergo Copilot or some other generative AI, we could really spend more time on doing things that require these big brains of ours to work a little bit harder.
I think what I predict happening is companies are beginning to invest in getting their data ready. I think that's what we have seen. Well, they've been able to use AI without their data being ready to the extent they possibly can for individual productivity gains. In the enterprise setting, they're not going to get much out of it just by focusing on individual productivity gains. So there will be huge investments to get through that data journey. I think the next in 27 or 26 and even to 27, where I see we making really good progress is the context engineering and the context orchestration. So getting the data right and get data ready, the quality, security, governance, all of that is one phase, which everybody is going through today. But getting the data AI ready, because AI only is as good as the context it has. That's where I see majority of the investments going in the next phase of evolution is in investing in context engineering and context orchestration. Once that happens, what happens is embedding AI into your processes becomes so much easier. Embedding AI into your workflows or reimagining the workflows to leverage AI becomes so much easier. The adoption will go through the roof. But right now, the enterprise context is a blocker. There are other blockers, but primarily, if you look at the technical challenge, it's enterprise context. Once you figure out a way to get the enterprise context ready, I think the AI adoption will just go through the roof across enterprises. And that's what I see happening in 2026 and even in 27.
Do you see context orchestration also including the people factors that are getting in the way? Is that all just part of the context? Is whether there's collaboration, lack of collaboration, being on the same page, people defending their turf?
I wish that'll happen naturally. We see that today, even without the context coming into play. But I think the first step is to overcome the technical challenge. But I could not agree with you more. Without addressing the people, readiness of people, AI readiness of the people, and get it right, and there won't be any adoption. But I'm optimistic that we'll get there. I think new roles will emerge. I'm beginning to see some new roles come up. Actually, that's quite interesting. Because how does everybody think AI natively? That's a big challenge in companies. right? They were still, everybody is scared about, okay, am I going to lose my job? I think that's a real challenge, but hopefully they will go together. But my guess is now the technology will go faster, and then everybody else will follow. This cultural issues that they'll have to handle, will follow along.
It's interesting too, with the fear of people not being able to concentrate on what's best for the company because they're worried about their own jobs. For at least the better part of 5 years, the data center industry has been complaining about chronic shortages of staff. What they don't realize is while they're spending all of their effort trying to make headway in high schools and colleges, there's a significant part of the workforce that's probably anywhere from like 30 to 50 that really wants to continue to do meaningful work, but no one's quite figured out a way yet to repurpose, retrain, reskill, retread. Probably some interesting opportunities in the channel partner ecosystem with that.
I would agree.
Well.
And I also stay to tell even young folks, graduates, there is a time to be in the data center business. This is the right time, because the data center business is gonna boom, and there's gonna be so much opportunity there. You have to think differently, but there's so much opportunity there. And look at the investments that are going across the board, across the world, not just in the US.
I think slowing it down is power.
Yeah.
Grid capacity, yes, additional challenges. Well, this has been super fascinating. I really appreciate the two of you taking the time today to share your rich career experience and the kinds of issues that you talk about with clients on a regular basis, how you navigate these conversations, what advice you'd give to people at different stages of their careers on how to best position themselves to stay relevant and where this is all going. So super, super appreciative. If people want to follow what you're working on or reach out to you for Santosh and for the best place, is LinkedIn the best place to start?
LinkedIn is the best place.
And same here. And I'll get a little pitch. I'm actually starting a AI Copilot user group in Central and Western New York. And so if people check me out on LinkedIn and they're interested in joining that, trying to build a little community to help people stay on top of this technology and remain relevant. So.
Yeah, it's terrific. I'm a huge fan of user groups and ecosystems and building communities. I actually helped lead a early Microsoft Windows user group back in central New Jersey in the mid-90s. It was super interesting because it was a combination of end users and developers in the evening. So like for the hour before we had dinner, it was all about end user topics, and the developers kind of rolled their eyes at us, and we'd have dinner. The sponsor would come in and give their little talk. And then the second half, our eyes would just completely glaze over with barely being able to keep up with what was going on. So it was super interesting. It was nice that Microsoft gave us the facility to use and helped with connecting us with the sponsors. But it's super interesting to see trying to bring two very disparate groups together on the end user support side and on the developer side.
That's the needle I'm trying to thread as well. So because I'm sure there'll be people all over the spectrum of skills and abilities. So.
And for sure, you run in the field, you run into client situations all the time, vice versa, where the developer doesn't want anything to do with end user support and network administration and training, and the system engineers and administrators can't develop and engineer ops. So, this is why it's so difficult for a single person consultancy to flourish anymore, because it's become the need so ultimately. So yeah, good luck in the venture. Hope to see it being wildly successful and growing the ecosystem.
I hope so too. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
I've been speaking today with Santosh Kaveti, who's the CEO and founder of ProArch, and Jim Spignardo, who's the director of cloud and AI for ProArch. Thanks so much for joining me today, gentlemen. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
The Data Center Go-to-Market podcast is sponsored by DCSMI, elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market GTM professionals in the growth of the data center industry. To stay informed about upcoming episodes, make sure that you subscribe to the Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter on the DCSMI website that can be found at www.dcsmi.com. Again, that URL is www.dcsmi.com.